guys, so today we are leaving the books behind and we're actually going to be talking about my favourite films. So I'm sure a lot of you watch films as much as you read books and are perhaps looking for some recommendations, interested in my taste in films. I've done a few videos on films in the past and you seem to have enjoyed them, so I thought it would be a nice overview to kind of, you know, really hone in on my all-time favourites that I highly recommend, that I've watched over and over again and would advise you all to go and watch too if you haven't already. I actually found this list quite difficult to make. I think there's about 5 films that are my firm favourites that will never move, but outside of those 5 it was, you know, there was wiggle room. It was kind of difficult to decide what made a film a favourite or not. I managed to narrow it down to 10 for now. This will most likely change in the future, but these are all films I've watched multiple times, I have loved for years, so like they have lasted, they have stood the test of time with me, and I would just, you know, recommend that you watch. I by no means have highbrow film taste, so you're going to see a lot of comedy on this list and perhaps a few really odd surprises. I've also left off any Disney films because I feel like I could do a separate top 10 Disney films if you'd like to see that, so let me know. But I think there are 2 films that unequivocally tie for my top place, so I'm going to tell you about those 2 first. The first one is the full Monty. So this has been a favourite film of mine since I was a child. We had the VHS tape and I watched it so many times that the VHS tape broke. Then I bought the DVD when I was a little bit older and I've continued to rewatch it into my adulthood. It stars Robert Carlyle, who's one of my favourite actors, as well as a cast of other recognisable British faces. It came out in 1997 and follows a group of unemployed men living in Sheffield. They're all on the dole and looking for work because most of them have been made redundant as the steel industry in Sheffield has sort of you know, been closed down and loads of them lost their jobs, and they're obviously, you know, looking for a way to make money. Some of them are looking to support their family or kind of prove themselves to their children, and what they end up doing is seeing that at the local sort of theatre, a travelling theatre group came and performed a sort of striptease, a male striptease for the women, and had like a women's only night, and they think, hey, why couldn't we do that? But they're just ordinary guys, they look really ordinary, they're not like big beefy muscle gym buffs, and they decide that they're going to do this. They are going to do the full Monty, in fact, and it's basically about them preparing for that. But at the same time as it being really funny, really comical, it also has a serious side. It's looking at the struggles of working class life in Sheffield in the 90s, and it's just so well done. The actors are phenomenal, the soundtrack is brilliant. Now, I love a well scored film, soundtrack is very important to me, and this one has a brilliant one. You'll probably recognise multiple of the songs, and if you haven't seen it, I would highly recommend giving it a watch. But my next film that ties for first place is, of course, if you've watched any of my videos where I discuss films before, Pride. It came out in 2014 and is set in the 1980s during the miners' strike, and it's actually based on a true story. In fact, it adheres quite closely to this true story, which was of this group called LGSM, who were lesbian and gay men support the miners, that were formed during the miners' strike in solidarity with the miners, as they saw a bit of themselves in the miners, as that they were both being, you know, targeted by the government, by, you know, discrimination, by oppression, by the police, and they wanted to show their support. So they get together to raise money for the miners. But also, I mean, it's the 1980s, there's a lot of homophobia. So at first they find it really difficult to find a mining community that will take their money. So they end up building a relationship with this mining community in Wales, and they're based in London, and they travel backwards and forwards. It is funny, it is heartwarming, it is sad, you will laugh, you will cry, all the emotions. It's brilliant. Again, the acting is brilliant. It stars some very well-known British actors like Imelda Staunton, Bill Nighy, and some young talent that you're probably familiar with as well if you watch a lot of British television, but kind of there's a generational gap in the actors there, and it's really lovely mixture of actors, and it's just so heartwarming. And I do have a soft spot for this film, not only because it's phenomenal to watch, but also because my dad was a miner, and I don't know, I just like, there's just something about it, the message of solidarity, it feels so close to my heart, and I just thought it was a beautiful film, and I have watched it so many times despite it only being out for 4 years. I make people watch it with me. I've sat down with so many different people and made them watch it for the first time with me, and they have all enjoyed it. Many of them have cried, all of them have laughed, and I would highly recommend this film. But my next favourite film is actually a French-Canadian film, and that is Starbuck. I know it sounds like the coffee shop, but it's not. The title actually comes from the name of a breeding racing horse called Starbuck. And it's set in Canada, in French-speaking Canada, and the whole film is in French, so if you don't speak French, there are subtitles. And it follows our protagonist, David Wozniak, who is of Polish descent. His parents emigrated to Canada before he was born, or when he was a little kid, and they own a meat shop. They supply meat. But David is a bit of a waster. He hasn't really achieved much with his life. He drives the delivery van for his dad's shop. He is in a lot of debt and in trouble with some dodgy people. But at the same time, his girlfriend has just gotten pregnant and she is unconvinced that he will be a suitable parent. Now that's, you know, the normal stuff that's going on. Something slightly less normal is going on. In this case, what has happened is that when David was in his 20s to get some money, he sold loads of his sperm to sperm banks, and because of some sort of accident with the rest of the sperm, only his sperm was used to impregnate over 500 women, and now, so this is about 20 years later, over 200 of those children are suing the sperm bank to find out who their father is. And obviously he's like, do I want them to know? No, I don't want everybody to know that I fathered over 500 children and 200 odd of them want to know who I am. So he's going to court with these kids, but you know, he's not showing his face, his lawyer's doing it for him. And at the same time he becomes curious about who these children are, so he starts bumping into them accidentally but on purpose and not telling them that he's his father so he can get to know them all. It sounds very odd. I'd highly recommend watching the trailer because I think it does a good job of selling what it's about. But again, funny, heartwarming, makes you cry but like tears of joy, and so well done. Again, that's what I look for in a film. It's funny, heartwarming with a little bit of emotion. And Starbuck has it all. I absolutely adore this film. Again, I've watched it numerous times. Another foreign film for me that makes it onto this list, however, is Pan's Labyrinth. This is the Guillermo del Toro film set during or just after the Spanish Civil War, and it's a combination of historical drama and fantasy film. It blends these two genres beautifully, and it is in Spanish. I do not speak Spanish, so I watch it with subtitles. But it follows our main character, who is a young girl, and her mother has just remarried a member of Franco's army, so one of the fascist generals, and they have moved to his home, and she is sort of exploring the world around her, and she also comes in contact with some of the rebels. But more importantly, she comes in contact with a faun. And this faun lives in the middle of this labyrinth on the grounds of this new home that she finds herself in. And this faun says that she can, you know, join this kingdom and become a princess if she completes some tasks. So she has to complete these fantastical tasks, but they're very dark fantastical. The visuals in this film are gorgeous. There's lots of little fairies, but they're quite creepy little fairies. There's this terrifying monster that you've probably seen images of who has his eyes in his hands, and there's just amazing visuals throughout it, amazing fantastical visuals, but at the same time it's blended in with his historical drama background, and it's such a fascinating concept and so beautifully stunning to watch. It is quite sad and it can be a little bit scary if you are easily frightened, but at the same time it's magical and beautiful and so worth it. I love this film. But to go back to one of my favourite films of all time, that has been a favourite film of mine again since I was a child. It's probably my earliest favourite film. I don't know, maybe it's tied with the full Monty, but that is Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, starring Marilyn Monroe and Jane Russell. I have loved this film since I was a kid. I was a massive mid-20th century musical lover as a child. I don't know if it was just the music and the fun and the costumes and the energy that those films had. I adored them. I used to watch Seven Brides for Seven Brothers over and over and over again as a child, but my favourite was Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, and this film follows Marilyn Monroe and Jane Russell's characters, who are two friends on a cruise ship. Marilyn Monroe has just become engaged to a rich young man because she's been looking for a rich husband, and they're sort of going on a tour of Europe. They're American, they're going on a tour of Europe on this cruise ship before she gets married, so it's like a pre-honeymoon trip with her friend. And it's a romance, it's about both these women's relationships, it's about both of these women falling in love, getting themselves in awkward situations. It's full of fantastic songs. You'll recognise some of them, I'm sure, even if you haven't seen the film, like Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend, and they just wear stunning dresses, they travel around Europe, they have fun on this cruise ship. I don't know how to explain to you how wonderful this film is, but I adore it. It is one of my favourite Marilyn Monroe films, although, I mean, Some Like It Hot and How to Marry a Millionaire are very close, but Gentlemen Prefer Blondes is definitely my favourite, and I just adore this film. Again, I've seen it hundreds of times, I imagine, at this point. My mum even took me to see it in the cinema in a special screening around the time of my 21st birthday as a gift, which was incredibly thoughtful, and it was very nice to see it on the big screen. So I love the songs in this film, I know them all off by heart, and I just think, again, it's comedic, it's funny, they're endearing, fun characters, and the songs are brilliant, so I would highly recommend watching it. So my next film's a bit of an outlier because it's an animated film, and it's not any of the animated films I'm sure you're expecting to see. I mean, I love Studio Ghibli, but it's nothing that highbrow. It's the My Little Pony film. And I don't mean any of this My Little Pony friendship is magic nonsense. No, I mean the 1986 animated classic. Do you know, I just figured it would actually be like a blatant lie not to include this in my top 10 favourite films, because it is. I don't know what that says about me, but it is still one of my favourite films. I, again, adored this film as a child. I had it on VHS, I then bought it on DVD when I was a bit older, and I've actually continued to rewatch it as an adult, so it's not a lie to say it's still one of my favourite films. My Little Ponies were my favourite toy as a child. I loved My Little Ponies. I had quite a few of them. I had non-My Little Ponies too. I just loved all the little ponies. And there used to be these cartoon films and television shows that they did around that time, which was actually sort of pre-me. I was born in 1992, so these actually came out before I was born. I think they're more based on like the first generation of My Little Ponies, whereas I was kind of part of the second generation of My Little Ponies. This sounds so weird to be saying, and you're not going to understand if you don't like My Little Ponies, but I think this film is genuinely good and can be enjoyed by people that didn't play with My Little Ponies as children, and I have actually made friends watch it who weren't My Little Pony fans as children, and they have enjoyed it because it's brilliant. It's a musical, so it's in the vein of a good old Disney film, and it stars Danny DeVito. Come on, Danny DeVito is in this film. Does that not just convince you that you need to watch it? I know what you're thinking, but please, you know, if you're ever just lost for something to watch, give it a chance. If you like an animated film, give it a chance. It's about the My Little Ponies who live in the magical world of the My Little Ponies, and the witches that live on the hill hate the My Little Ponies. So the witches are trying to come up with a cunning plan to like destroy the lives of the My Little Ponies. So they send this stuff called Smooth, which is like, it looks a bit like cement, to destroy their home. And some of the My Little Ponies have to go and seek the help of some other types of ponies to get rid of the Smooth, and they come in contact with giant spiders, creepy trees, these little mountain creatures called the Grundles, who their king is played by Danny DeVito, as we've already discussed. And I think I already said, but there's songs in it. It is a musical, it's a cartoon musical. I know all the songs, I love them, I love this film. I feel like it's going to be hard to convince anybody that hasn't seen it, but give it a chance. Next up, I'm going to mention another comedy, and like I mentioned, comedy is just my favourite genre when it comes to films, to be honest. And this one is Frequently Asked Questions About Time Travel, or FAQ About Time Travel. This film came out in 2009 and stars Chris O'Dowd, Dean Lennox Kelly, Mark Wooton and Anna Faris. So we've got three very, very British male actors and then an American actor. So there's a bit of a crossover between British and American film, but it is set in Britain, and the whole film is set in this one pub, which I just love conceptually. So it follows these three guys who go to the pub after work together, and two of them are massive science fiction nerds and the other one's like a bit too cool for that nonsense, but they're just sitting down having a pint, and they accidentally come across a time travel portal in the men's loos. One of them goes to the toilet, comes out of the toilet, and he's in a different period of time in the same pub, actually only a few hours in the future. And they find every time they go into the toilet they end up in a different period of time of this pub, so sometimes it's hundreds of years in the future, sometimes it's an hour backwards, and they just get into these like crazy wacky adventures and have to figure out what's going on. In the meantime, Anna Faris is also from the future, and she has come back to fix this time leak that there is in the toilet, and actually they kind of have to save themselves because someone is out for blood, and it sounds mad but it's so funny. Again, I love the concept that it's basically just set in this one pub but they go backwards and forwards in time. I think it just has a lot of what I find so endearing about British comedy. And if you like science fiction, there's lots of great science fiction references in there to like classics, and I just think it's a brilliant film. I also love Chris O'Dowd, he's one of my favourite actors, and he's actually in my next film, so I'm going to talk about that now. This is The Sapphires. This is a 2012 Australian film, but also with Chris O'Dowd. This is loosely based on a true story, and I'm not sure how accurate it is to the true story, but it's set during the Vietnam War, and it follows 4 Indigenous Australian women who are all related. 3 are sisters and one of them is their cousin, and they want to enter a competition essentially to be one of the performing acts for the troops overseas, like to sort of, you know, bring them some entertainment. They all sing, so they start this like 4-person girl band, but they obviously meet with a lot of discrimination for not being white, and Chris O'Dowd basically accidentally becomes their manager. And it's just, again, it's funny, it's sad, it's heartwarming, it tugs at your heartstrings. There's some real moments of worry and concern there. It's set during a war, and it's just, it's wonderful. It's so heartwarming and endearing, and such a beautiful story. And the actors are phenomenal. I hadn't seen any of the 4 women in anything before watching this film, but they were all incredible actors and brilliant singers. So if you like music, if you like the 1960s, any of these things, this is a film well worth checking out, and I'm sure a lot of you are fans of Chris O'Dowd, so if you haven't seen The Sapphires, check this one out. It is one of his best, and the lead female actresses are phenomenal. Almost there, however. Next up is Made in Dagenham. This is another film set in the 1960s. It actually might be set in the exact same year as The Sapphires. It came out in 2010 and is set, funnily enough, in Dagenham, which is in England, and it follows true events. Once again, it's loosely based. I think I like a film inspired by true events. I think I find them quite empowering often to follow these stories. And it follows Sally Hawkins' character Rita O'Grady, who is an working class woman. She has 2 kids and a husband, and she works at one of the Ford car factories stitching the leather seating. But she and the other female employees are being undervalued in comparison to the male employees. Although they are doing what is skilled work, they have been deemed unskilled, which means they can be paid less. And basically what that was an easy way to pay women less. Deem what work women predominantly do as unskilled despite how skilled it is. And it's basically about Rita and her fellow employees at the factory fighting for the Equal Pay Act, which came into effect in the UK in 1970 because of the Ford machinist workers and other female workers like them who campaigned to be paid equally to men for equal work. And it's amazing because it's such an important step forward. We still have a massive problem with the pay gap in the UK, but it was like still a massive victory, and what those women did through striking, giving up their pay when they already didn't have that much money, through making a stand, what they achieved for everybody in the United Kingdom is amazing. And I love this film. I think it does a wonderful job of portraying that story and really invigorating you. Again, it's heartwarming, it's sometimes funny, it's got a fantastic soundtrack, and they're just really endearing, wonderful characters that pull at your heartstrings. My adjectives are the same because that's what I look for in a film. But lastly, I'm going to mention kind of two films. I'm cheating for number 10, and that is Monty Python's Life of Brian and The Holy Grail. So I couldn't quite pick between these two films, but you know, just go and watch both of them. So Monty Python was a 1970s British sketch show, and they made some films. So they have more films than these two, but these are the best. Life of Brian follows a young man who's mistaken for the Messiah around the beginning of year 1, the time of Jesus, and he's called Brian, and everybody thinks he's the Messiah, and he's like, I'm not the Messiah. Sounds really odd, but really funny. And The Holy Grail follows King Arthur and his men searching for the Holy Grail. So there you go. Those are my plot summaries of those two, but they're just really wacky comedies. The team included Graham Chapman, John Cleese, Terry Gilliam, Eric Idle, Terry Jones and Michael Palin, who are all brilliant British comedians, and they're just so funny. Like, I've never watched somebody watch these films and not laugh out loud. Their main purpose is to make you laugh, and they're really eccentric, and they might be set in historical periods, but that doesn't stop them from disregarding historical accuracy. It's brilliant. They're just really out there. They're quotable films as well. They are just the kind of films that you then go on to quote for years to come with your friends that you've watched them with, and I really enjoy that. My friend Misha and I still quote the Holy Grail to one another on a regular basis. I did want to briefly mention though, and I know I've already said my 10 films as well as some other films, but one of my favourite films, and I didn't include it in my top 10 because I actually do prefer the book, but I honestly think the film is brilliant as well, and that is The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And I know that's probably contentious because it veers off and misses a lot out from the Douglas Adams book, but I love this film and I would highly recommend watching the film. It was actually watching the film the year it came out in the cinema that then got me to go and read the books, and it still holds such a soft place in my heart, and I still regularly rewatch it. Plus the song at the beginning with the dolphins is perfection. So I did want to briefly mention that. And another film that I think would have made it onto this list if I'd watched it first more time ago, and that is The Angel's Share. This is a Ken Loach comedy drama set in Scotland, which I only watched for the first time last year in 2017, and I've only watched it twice. So I felt like I've seen all of these other films so many times that I think The Angel's Share needs some more time to stew and see if it sticks around, but I think it's going to, because it really, you know, ticks all of my boxes when it comes to films. So I am briefly mentioning it here because I think it could very much become one of my favourite films. It's about a group of young people who are all doing community service for having committed crimes and to keep them out of prison, and the officer that's overseeing the community service ends up getting them interested in whiskey. And The Angel's Share is what describes the portion of whiskey that evaporates while it's in the casket, and they become really interested in whiskey and then discover that there's this really expensive casket of whiskey that's one of a kind about to go in the market, and they come up with a plan to siphon off a small bit of it, which could be described as the Angel's Share, and sell that on for tons of money. And it's so much fun, endearing, hard-hitting but funny, and I adored this film. So there you go, you've got like a good 12 to 20 films in this list. So I do hope you found something new to watch and that you enjoy these films if you go and watch them after this. I'd love to know both if you've seen any of these films and have any thoughts on them, if you're now interested in watching any of them, and what your favourite films are. Please do let me know, because I'm always looking for new films to watch. Who isn't? But until next time, happy reading and happy watching, and I'll see you all again soon. Bye.